Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into the eerie, adrenaline-pumping world of Five Nights TD, one of the most intense tower defense games out there. If you're a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's, you're in for a real treat, because this game brings all of your favorite animatronics together in one place to defend or terrify like never before. But here's the catch: with so many iconic animatronics to choose from, picking the best ones can be a bit of a nightmare. Whether you're aiming to dominate the leaderboard or just survive another wave, choosing the right characters is everything. So in this video, we're here to help you put together the ultimate animatronic squad. From fan favorites like Freddy and Chica to some surprising underdogs, we'll break down which units are must-haves and which ones you might want to pass on. Stick around because we're about to unveil our ultimate FNTD tier list. Let's see who really has what it takes to keep you in the game and on top. Grab a snack, maybe turn down the lights, and let's jump right in. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking units in Five Nights TD. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. First, let's talk about the best units for early game. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Toy Bonnie, Toy Freddy, Summer Toy Bonnie, and Foxy. Alright, so let's dive into the unfortunate world of D-tier starter units in Five Nights TD. These guys, well, they're here, but not quite ready to bring anything impressive to the table. If you're using these units, you're probably going to hit some major roadblocks. Let's start with Toy Bonnie. This little blue bunny has some of the weakest stats across the board. I mean, bad doesn't even cover it. Toy Bonnie is the kind of epic unit that makes you question, why is this even labeled as epic? Nothing here makes Toy Bonnie worth keeping around if you're aiming for any solid strategy. And then, poor Toy Freddy. Talk about a bear who just can't keep up with the big leagues. His range is nearly non-existent, and with only 20 DPS on placement, it's like he's there for decoration more than anything else. You'd think that a unit with Toy in its name would bring a bit of playful chaos, but Toy Freddy's just sitting in the back, watching the action without contributing much. It's rough because you can tell the devs wanted to make him cool, but he just falls so flat in terms of stats and playability. Now, here's a twist. A summer version of Toy Bonnie. Sounds fun, right? Wrong. Summer Toy Bonnie slows enemies, which sounds useful, but honestly, you're way better off just using a basic starter. The slow effect might seem helpful at first glance, but trust me, there's not much Summer Bonnie can actually do with it. And don't even get me started on Foxy. He's melee, which immediately puts him at a disadvantage in a tower defense game. Melee units don't exactly have an easy time here, so Foxy ends up being more of a liability than an asset. These units might be fun to look at, but if you want a strong team, you might want to keep them on the bench. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Baker Toy Chica, Party Chica, Withered Chica, Sniper Cupcake, and Chica. Alright, listen up folks. We're diving into the chaotic animatronic world of Five Nights TD, and today, it's all about the C-tier starter units. These aren't exactly the top performers, but hey, if you're just starting out and desperate for some backup, they might save your bacon. Maybe. Let's break them down. First up, we've got Baker Toy Chica. She's what you'd call a beginner's best friend. Not outstanding, but she does get the job done with her explosion attacks. If you're still getting your bearings in the game, she's okay. You wouldn't take her to the grand finale, but she's solid enough to hold the fort while you figure out your strategy. Then we've got Party Chica. And, let's be real, calling her a party might be a bit of a stretch. Her one bright spot? Splash damage. But aside from that, well, she's not exactly setting the world on fire with her stats. Think of Party Chica as that one friend who's good at one party trick but can't really keep up with the rest. Next on our lineup is Withered Chica. Now, I know the name sounds intimidating, but don't let it fool you. She's only marginally better than Toy Bonnie, and that's not saying much. She's really just hanging on by a thread here, and trust me, you've got better options than Withered Chica if you want to survive the night. And saving the best, or least worst, for last, let's talk Sniper Cupcake and regular old Chica. Sniper Cupcake's got an impressive range. I mean, if you want to snipe from afar, this little cupcake can do it. But the low DPS and limited placement options, not ideal. Then there's Chica, the OG explosion unit with a painfully slow attack speed. She's best used for early waves or taking down groups of weaklings, but that's about it. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Rockin' Bonnie, Pirate Withered Foxy, Vendor Toy Chica, Buccaneer Foxy, Major Freddy, and Freddy. Alright, let's dive into these B-tier starter units for Five Nights TD, where we're talking the heavy hitters of the early waves. Now, these units aren't the top tier legends, but let me tell you, they've got just enough punch to carry you through those initial rounds. They might not be the MVPs of the late game, but they're reliable and versatile enough to get you going strong. Starting off, Rockin' Bonnie is one of those units that looks killer on paper thanks to her full AoE attack. She can clear waves with some style, but don't let that fool you. When you get deeper into the game, her shine starts to wear off. There are stronger picks out there, but hey, if you want to shake things up early on, Bonnie's got you covered for those first few waves. Then we've got Pirate Withered Foxy, who's basically a close cousin to Major Freddy. He does a decent job holding the line, but he's not winning any DPS awards. Think of him as that dependable friend you can count on to be there in the early game, even if he's not the flashiest. He's a solid starter, but as you get into tougher waves, you'll start to see why he's sitting comfortably in B tier. Now, Vendor Toy Chica, she's like the budget-friendly version of Patriot Freddy. She may not bring the highest damage numbers, but for those early waves, she's holding her own. Solid, consistent, and pretty decent with handling what comes at you without too much fuss. If you need a bit of range with minimal fuss, Vendor Toy Chica is your go-to. And let's talk about the one and only Buccaneer Foxy. This guy is basically the fresh and improved Freddy. He's got the whole package. Higher placement count, better damage, shorter cooldown, and more range than the OG Freddy. He might not be the showstopper, but for an early game pick, Buccaneer Foxy is the perfect choice if you want to power through those initial waves smoothly. Plus, you get that pirate vibe, which is just an added bonus, right? The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Phantom Cupcake, Patriot Freddy, Endozo2, Commando Endo, Rad Freddy, Nightmare Freddy, Funtime Foxy, and Cowboy Freddy. Alright, listen up, because if you're picking starter units in Five Nights TD, you'll want to get these guys on your radar. First up, we have Phantom Cupcake. Now, don't let the name fool you. This cupcake is anything but sweet. It's got some of the highest DPS among all starter units, and there's nothing vanilla about that. Phantom Cupcake is the one you can throw in and trust to dish out consistent damage. Honestly, if you're looking for a solid all-rounder, it's a go-to pick. You won't regret it. Then we have Patriot Freddy. Now, here's a guy who knows how to make an entrance, and a big one. This ultra-cheap explosion unit is a beast in the early game. He's perfect for those big waves of enemies where you need quick, intense crowd control. He'll clear a path so efficiently that you'll barely have time to blink. So, if you like to keep things under control from the start, Patriot Freddy has your back, especially in those heavy early game situations. Let's talk Endo-02 now. He's all about that range and single target DPS, making him great for picking off those pesky enemies from a distance. Is he the best in the game? Nah, but he's solid enough. The thing is, he's a little outshined by Phantom Foxy, who can do what Endo does just a bit better. But still, if you like that ranged focus and single target damage without too much fuss, Endozo2 might just fit your style. Commando Endo brings a unique twist. He's a summoner. Now, his personal DPS? Not the highest, but it's those summons that really make him stand out. They jump into the fray, adding extra damage to your setup, which can make Commando Endo surprisingly viable, especially if you're looking to cover more ground without spending too much. Now, Rad Freddy is a bit of a show stealer here. If you're a fan of Sniper Cupcake, Rad Freddy is just a straight upgrade. Basically double the DPS with the same rock-solid stats. It's like taking Sniper Cupcake and giving it a serious caffeine boost. For early game stages, he's practically a cheat code, tearing through enemies with ease. So if you want a sniper that really packs a punch, Rad Freddy is your guy. Last but not least, let's give a shout out to Cowboy Freddy. Good old Cowboy Freddy brings that Wild West style with a long range and strong DPS. The only catch? He's a single target unit, so he's not great for dealing with large crowds. But when you need precision strikes, Cowboy Freddy is an absolute sniper. Just picture him on those compact story stages, picking off enemies one by one with that killer accuracy. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Elizabeth, Freddle, Witch Toy Chica, Tavern Chica, Bonnet, and Phantom Foxy. Alright, so let's talk about the S-tier starters in Five Nights TD, the ones you'll want on your team if you're looking to dominate right from the start. Now, these aren't just any beginner units. These are the heavy hitters, the ones who can hold their own and then some. Let's dive into who's worth the spotlight. Starting with Elizabeth, our queen of splash and slow. This character packs some serious punch with her impressive DPS and range, But the best part, her upgrades are super affordable, making her a total steal for anyone looking to rack up kills without breaking the bank. Elizabeth's combination of area damage and slowing effect makes her an absolute beast against mob waves. She'll save your team from being overrun, no question. Now, Freddle might not seem like much at first glance, and honestly, he's not quite top-tier material, but don't count him out just yet. While his cooldown can be a bit slow for some tastes, Freddle still holds his own against units like Commando Endo. He's got enough raw power to make an impact in the early stages, even if he's not the fastest on the block. So, if you're looking for a solid backup, Freddle can still be a good fit. And we can't leave out Witch Toy Chica, a true powerhouse among starters. Witch Toy Chica is a game changer with her low cost and ability to handle both bosses and mob waves. This character doesn't just hold the line, she obliterates it. For anyone just starting in FNTD, she's a no-brainer pick. Cheap, versatile, and seriously reliable, she'll make sure your defense holds strong no matter what the game throws at you. Next up, Tavern Chica is another powerhouse with excellent damage, range, and a splash attack that can clear entire waves. Her wide AoE splash makes her borderline overpowered, especially for a starter unit. Tavern Chica's strength lies in her ability to cover multiple enemies at once, keeping your defenses solid even when things get chaotic. She's a fan favorite for a reason and an easy go-to for any strategy. Lastly, let's talk about Bonnet and Phantom Foxy. Bonnet is an all-around MVP with great splash damage, range, and ridiculously cheap placement and upgrades. This guy is essential for story mode, where every resource counts. Meanwhile, Phantom Foxy is your single-target DPS savior, easy on the budget with his 4 placement ability, and super reliable in the early game. Both of these characters make sure your strategy stays balanced and cost-effective. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Fortified Endo 02, Phone Guy, Purple Guy, Tarnished Spring Bonnie, Grim Foxy, and Jackpot Freddy. Alright, so let's dive into the absolute best of the best when it comes to starter units in Five Nights TD. You know, when you're building up your roster, these S+ tier units are like the holy grail. They're a mix of powerhouse DPS, crowd control, and solid utility. But hey, just because they're good doesn't mean they come easy. Let's break down why each of these units absolutely crushes it in the game. First up, Fortified Endo 02. This guy's a powerhouse. We're talking insane DPS for a starter unit, but there's a catch. His recipe is ridiculously expensive. I mean, he can shred enemies like there's no tomorrow, but dropping all those resources on his evolution might hold you back from other upgrades. So if you're rolling in resources, he's worth it, but if not, maybe keep him on your wish list. Now, let's talk about the legendary Phone Guy. This dude is almost too good, with amazing range and massive AoE damage. He's got Endgame vibes, honestly. And the best part? He slows down enemies, so they're practically sitting ducks. Sure, the Crying Child may still take the crown, but Phone Guy is one heck of a close runner-up. You'll see him putting in work in every round, no doubt about it. Purple Guy is a total game changer among the newer starter units. Imagine this, he spawns turrets with killer range and damage, letting you keep the pressure on non-stop. It's like having an extra defense line just popping up on command. If you can get him early on, he'll carry you through some rough patches with ease, making your job as the commander way easier. Tarnished Spring Bonnie might be a melee unit, but don't let that fool you. Her range and damage are absolutely bonkers. She's tough to get, sure, and honestly, going after her is a mission in itself. But if you're up for it, she's got insane potential, almost outshining easier-to-get characters like Patriot Freddy or Witch Toy Chica. Just brace yourself for the grind. And finally, we've got Grim Foxy and Jackpot Freddy. Grim Foxy's splash attacks have solid DPS, making him a top-tier pick among the starters. As for Jackpot Freddy, he's got a unique flair. Not only does he deal solid damage, but he also earns you money. The one thing holding him back, his range. Throw in an upgrade for that, and he's an absolute beast. So, there you have it. These S+ tier units are worth every resource you can pour into them. Now here are the best units for mid-game. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Cupcake Tank, Balloon Boy, Golden Freddy, Nightmare Chica, and Toy Chica. Alright, let's get into the weeds of the worst mid-game units in Five Nights TD. These units are basically the kind you hope no one spots in your lineup, because they're, well, pretty tragic. If you've ever slapped down a unit in the heat of a mid-game match only to find them doing absolutely nothing useful, you probably know the pain of using one of these. Starting off with the Cupcake Tank. Now, I don't know who came up with the idea to throw a cupcake into the heat of battle, but it's a bit rough. Cupcake Tank's main thing is summoning. Sounds cool, right? But nope! Its summons are so irrelevant you could almost call them decorations. Seriously, it's like the game developers just tossed it in for laughs. There's just no reason to spend resources on this one when you could be investing in something with a punch. Cupcake Tank, you're in the "why did I even put you here" category. Now, let's talk about Balloon Boy. Imagine taking a regular unit and then slapping 4 times the price tag on it for no apparent reason. That's Balloon Boy. Think of him as an overpriced toy Chica, but somehow even less effective, if that's possible. This little guy is practically the mascot for wasted resources in Five Nights TD. Every time you use him, you feel that sting of regret. Honestly, I think Balloon Boy might just be trolling us. Then there's Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy looks like he should be powerful, but don't let the shine fool you. This bears a letdown. With a painfully low DPS and a cost that will make your heart hurt, Golden Freddy struggles to keep up, especially mid-game. It's almost like they designed him to look intimidating, but didn't bother giving him the damage to back it up. If you're after a unit that drains your resources and delivers nothing in return, Golden Freddy's your bear. Moving down the list, we have Nightmare Chica. Now, I wanted to like Nightmare Chica, I really did, but she's just not doing it. She's got a high cost, a short range, and damage output that's, well, kind of meh for the price. She's not the absolute worst, mind you, but she's still in that zone where she's just not pulling her weight. There are better options out there, so Nightmare Chica, we're sorry. But it's a no from us. Finally, Toy Chica wraps up our list of D-tier misfits. With barely any range and pretty disappointing DPS, Toy Chica is just not mid-game material. It's like she's trying her best, but it's not nearly enough to stand against the competition. If you're aiming for a unit that might just let you down at a crucial moment, look no further. And there you have it, our Five Nights TD D-tier Hall of Shame. These units might be fun in theory, but when push comes to shove, they're just not going to carry you through those tougher stages. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, 7 Seas Foxy, Bonnie, Nightmare Balloon Boy, Coco Boy, Nightmare Cupcake, and Withered Foxy. Oh, so you're pushing through the mid-game in Five Nights TD, huh? Perfect timing because we're diving into some of the C-tier units that you'll encounter around now. These are the ones that might help you hold the line, but let's be real, they aren't going to wow you. Think of them as placeholders. Good for a bit of backup, but definitely not your top contenders. First up is 7 Seas Foxy. If you've used Leviathan Mangle, imagine that, but dialed down just a notch. The cool thing is Foxy's range, longer than what you'd expect at this tier. That extended reach makes him a decent mid-game option for taking down waves of mobs. Just don't expect him to carry your whole defense, he's more of a support act than the main star. Then there's Bonnie, who's kind of like Withered Freddy's cousin, except with higher range and unfortunately lower DPS. Bonnie's placement and upgrade costs are another hit to his value. It's like the game decided to stack the odds against him and he's left as a backup plan rather than a go-to. You can make him work, but if resources are tight, look elsewhere. Now, Nightmare Balloon Boy, oh boy. He's got Pierce, so he sounds promising, right? Well, don't get too excited. His low DPS and short range really hold him back, especially compared to other units in the mid and early game stages. He's not the worst, but if you're aiming to build a solid lineup, you'll probably want to pass on this guy. Coco Boy's next, and while he's better than Balloon Boy, we're still talking C tier here, so adjust your expectations. His explosive radius gives him a slight edge, especially against clustered enemies, but it's not enough to make him a standout pick. Think of him as a decent filler, but don't expect any game-changing explosions. And lastly, there's Nightmare Cupcake and Withered Foxy. Nightmare Cupcake's single-target DPS is the main thing dragging her down. She's just not effective enough for her role. Withered Foxy, though, is a bit of a nostalgic pick. He used to be meta back in the day, but now he's more of a relic overshadowed by better units. You can use him as a starter, sure, but don't expect too much from him. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Algae Fredbear, Withered Freddy, Mercenary Foxy, Nightmare Foxy, Endo03, Artillery Puppet, Hooligan Toy Bonnie, Glitched Cupcake, and Jacko Chica. Alright, hold on to your Fazbear hats because we're diving into the B-tier mid-game units in Five Nights TD, and oh boy, there are some interesting picks here. These units won't blow you away, but they can be surprisingly solid if used right. Let's start off with Algae Fredbear. He might seem like a weaker version of Withered Golden Freddy, but he's still pretty dependable. Sure, you only get 3 placements, which might feel limiting, but don't sleep on him. He can hold his own, especially if you're pairing him with other high DPS units. Think of him as the sturdy backup that you can rely on, even if he's not the main star. Now, Withered Freddy is next, and he's like that old reliable buddy who might need a bit of encouragement to really shine. His DPS is steady, and his placement count of 3 means you can get a good setup going. But there's a catch. He's a bit of a money drain. Upgrading him can be pricey, so if you're tight on cash, he may not be the most efficient choice. Still, he has his uses, and for players who can invest in upgrades, Withered Freddy has some staying power. Moving on, Mercenary Foxy is where things start getting interesting. This guy's cheap as chips, both to place and to upgrade, making him ideal if you're looking to save up for more costly units later on. His base damage is on the lower side, but don't worry too much about that because, plot twist, you can place 4 of him. The sheer numbers mean he can cover a decent area and keep enemies at bay, giving you room to breathe during those mid-game waves. And here's one for the fans of fast, powerful hits, Nightmare Foxy. Imagine PBB, but with a twist. He's got similar damage, but his cooldown is lower, meaning he's got a faster attack rate, and he has a longer range too. The catch? His area of effect is on the smaller side, so he might struggle to hit clustered enemies. But if you're aiming for a punchy, consistent hitter that can reach far-off targets, Nightmare Foxy is a fun one to have in your lineup. Then there's Endo03, a unit that recently got a buff, and let me tell you, it's been a game changer. He has solid single-target DPS and a placement count of 4, so he can be spread out to cover more ground. He's especially handy if you're dealing with tough enemies that need focused fire. Endozo3 might not look like much at first, but don't underestimate the power of a well-timed buff. And last but not least, we have Hooligan Toy Bonnie. This unit's got a nice AoE splash attack, and the DPS isn't bad either. While he may not be up there with the best of the best in the mid-game, he's a solid pick if you're looking for an AoE solution. Plus, his attacks are just plain fun to watch, giving you that extra flair while you fend off enemies. So, if you're in the mid-game and looking for reliable, fun picks, these B-tier units are well worth a try. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Slick Bonnie, Nightmare Fredbear, Sentinel Bonnie, Rocketeer Mangle, Withered Golden Freddy, Phantom Golden Freddy, and Pumpkin Balloon Boy. Alright, let's dive into some of the mid-game units in Five Nights TD and break down which ones are really worth your time as you progress. Mid-game is that sweet spot where things start to get interesting, but you're not yet dealing with the god-tier units that make things a breeze. So, we'll take a look at some solid A-tier choices that can carry you through those tough waves. First up, we've got Slick Bonnie. Now, Slick Bonnie is kind of like Bounty Mangle's little sibling. Same vibe, but toned down just a bit. It costs less, has lower range, and doesn't pump out as much DPS, but it's still a solid option for holding down the fort in the mid-game. If you're looking for something that won't break the bank and gets the job done, Slick Bonnie is a great choice. Then there's Nightmare Fredbear. This unit's a nice, solid pick, but let's be real. When you've got War Machine Foxy and other S-tier units, Fredbear feels a bit outshined. Still, he's reliable and does enough damage to be useful. He's that dependable friend who shows up to help, but if you're serious about getting those S-tier units, Nightmare Fredbear might be outclassed by the big dogs. Next, let's talk about Sentinel Bonnie. Sentinel Bonnie is like War Machine Foxy's budget version. It's got a lot of the same perks, but with slightly less punch. While you might not get the insane power of Foxy, Sentinel Bonnie is still a force to be reckoned with in the mid-game. It's strong enough to give you a good edge, but it won't steal the spotlight when you start unlocking the true heavy hitters. Now, if you're into explosion units, Rocketeer Mangle is definitely one to keep in mind. This unit has some of the best DPS in the game when it comes to splash damage, but here's the catch. It has very low range. So, while it packs a punch, you're going to have to position it carefully to make the most out of its potential. If you can manage its placement, Rocketeer Mangle will make sure those enemies feel the heat. We also can't forget Withered Golden Freddy. This guy might even top Sentinel Bonnie, and here's why. Withered Golden Freddy can handle more placements, which means its total DPS can really shine. But here's the thing, it takes more investment to truly unlock its full potential. It's a bit of a grind, but if you're willing to put in the work, this unit can absolutely carry you through some rough spots in the mid-game. And last but certainly not least, there's Phantom Golden Freddy. This one is essentially a toned-down version of Withered Golden Freddy, so if you're looking for something a bit cheaper but still effective, Phantom Golden Freddy might be the better pick. It won't do as much damage as Withered Golden Freddy, but it can still hold its own in the mid-game. It's like the backup you bring when you can't quite afford the best, but it still gets the job done. So, there you have it. Some of the best A-tier mid-game units in Five Nights TD. Whether you're looking for something explosive, reliable, or just a strong all-arounder, these units have got you covered. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Scott, Phantom Balloon Boy, Jacko Cannon, War Machine Foxy, Blind Eye Foxy, Lolbit, Endo04, Rave Demon Bonnie, Jacko Bonnie, and Funtime Freddy. Alright, let's dive into some of the most broken mid-game units in Five Nights TD, the ones that can carry you to victory even when you're still building up your strategy. These units aren't just good, they're so good, you'll probably wonder how you ever played without them. Let's get into it. First up, we've got Scott. If there's one unit that can handle everything in the mid-game, it's Scott. This guy is an absolute monster with insane damage, splash, and range. Plus, he has 6 upgrade levels. It's like he was designed to solo carry your entire defense line. Place him and just watch him go to work. He'll clean up waves like it's no big deal. Trust me, Scott will be your best friend in those tricky mid-game rounds. Next, let's talk about Phantom Balloon Boy. Now, this guy is a beast in his own right. With massive damage, range, and AoE, area of effect abilities, Phantom Balloon Boy is a fantastic pick. He's a bit of an investment with his high upgrade costs, but if you've got the resources, he'll pay off in spades. You'll quickly see why he's considered one of the best for mid-game, just don't expect him to come cheap. Now, if you're on a budget but still need something solid, Jacko Cannon might be your best bet. It's got a super cheap upgrade cost and does a pretty solid job of dealing damage, especially in the mid-game. The only downside is that it's not the best for early waves, thanks to its high placement cost. But once you get it up and running, Jacko Cannon will hold its own and make sure you've got a solid defense in the later rounds. And don't forget about War Machine Foxy. This one is perfect for those who like things fast and effective. War Machine Foxy has a very high stat set for the price and low placement cost, which means you can get it up and running quickly. This makes it a great transition unit when you need to start saving up for the really big units. It's a solid choice that doesn't make you break the bank early on. Now, Blind Eye Foxy is something special. This unit is perfect for tackling those annoying bosses that love to show up mid-game. Its DPS is insane, and it has a bonus feature. It can slow enemies with its attack. The combo of high damage and slowing effects makes Blind Eye Foxy invaluable, especially when you're dealing with those massive waves or nightmare bosses. You might want to consider Lolbit if you're into strategic placement. Lolbit isn't the best for raw DPS, but the ability to stun enemies can be a game changer, especially if you're dealing with tougher enemies. The downside? You can only place 2 of them, so you need to pair them with other solid units to make the stun really worth it. Still, if used right, Lolbit can turn the tide of a battle. And finally, we have Funtime Freddy, the epic DPS unit that can lay down some serious damage. With a splash attack, great DPS, and a decent range, Funtime Freddy is a mid-game powerhouse. The only downside is its high placement and upgrade costs, but if you can afford it, this unit is totally worth the investment. It'll carry you through those tougher waves without a doubt. So there you have it, some of the best mid-game units that can truly make a difference in your Five Nights TD gameplay. Whether you're looking for insane DPS, slow effects, or just a solid all-around unit, these units have got your back. Which one is your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Anim Dude, Galleon Foxy, Circuit Breaker Freddy, Fazbear Mafia, Mendo, Bounty Mangle, and Flame Empress Chica. Alright, let's dive into some of the best S+ tier mid-game units in Five Nights TD. You know, the ones that turn the tide in your favor and make those tough waves look like a walk in the park. First up, we have Anim Dude. This guy is like Scott's cooler, beefed-up cousin. Sure, his upgrades are a bit on the expensive side, and you might feel the sting when you see how many resources you'll need to craft him, but trust me, he's totally worth it. Once you get him going, he can absolutely shred through enemies. Next, let's talk about Galleon Foxy, who is honestly one of the top picks when it comes to mid-game damage. Not only does he hit like a truck, but his splash attack has the added bonus of slowing down enemies, making it even harder for those creeps to get past him. If you're running into trouble around this stage, you'll want this guy in your corner. His ability to control the pace of the wave with his slowdown is a game changer. Now, if you're looking for insane single-target damage, Circuit Breaker Freddy should be on your radar. He has this ridiculously high DPS that'll burn down any big bosses you throw at him. The only real downside here is his placement cost. It's a little hefty, But once you have him on the field, he's definitely one of the best mid-game units, and you can even keep him around for the later stages. Fazbear Mafia might just be the most fun summon unit to use in the mid-game. This squad comes in hot with some seriously high DPS, making it an excellent choice for crushing enemies with brute force. Plus, the way they work together just adds a layer of strategy that can really tip the balance in your favor when things start heating up. Finally, we have Bounty Mangle, who brings some serious bang for your buck. With a huge AoE attack and a low cooldown, this unit has the potential to wipe out large swathes of enemies in no time. What's even better, it also farms gold while you're at it. That 30 max range is just the cherry on top. If you're looking for a powerhouse that can keep up with the waves and make you some extra cash, this is the unit to grab. And don't forget about Flame Empress Chica, who is just ridiculously OP for the mid-game. Good range, decent cooldown, and her splash burn attack is what makes her DPS go through the roof. You'll find her laying waste to hordes of enemies in no time. All in all, these units are the real deal when you're looking to make it past those tough mid-game waves. Finally, let's talk about the best units for endgame and support. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Eclipse Ballora, Music Man, Boombox Foxy, Fredbear, Spring Bonnie, Ballora, Maestro Puppet, Plush Trap, Hawaii Endo 02. Endo, the Crying Child, Amalgam, and Fazcade. Alright, if you're diving into Five Nights TD and you're wondering which support units are worth your time, buckle up, because today we're diving into the best of the best, and some of the absolute worst. No sugarcoating here, let's break down the tier list and see who you really need on your team. Spoiler alert, you're gonna want Eclipse Ballora, trust me on this one. First up, let's talk about Eclipse Ballora. This unit is the MVP of support, no questions asked. Not only does she buff damage, but she also slashes cooldowns, making her an absolute powerhouse. You want her on your team, especially if you're trying to keep things rolling smoothly and dish out massive damage. If you're aiming for a strong, efficient setup, Eclipse Ballora is the support to go for. Now, if Eclipse Ballora is the king of buffs, then Music Man is the trusty knight right behind her. Music Man doesn't just stand there looking cool, he actively reduces cooldowns of nearby units, which is super helpful, especially when you've got some debuffing units on the field. Timing is everything in Five Nights TD, and Music Man's cooldown reduction makes sure your team is ready for action as fast as possible. But what about the slower units? Well, that's where Boombox Foxy comes in. She doesn't quite have Music Man's cooldown reduction, but she brings something extra to the table, a 25% AoE slow. This is a game changer for dealing with mobs, especially in those endless runs. Sure, her cooldown reduction isn't as strong, but that slow can be the difference between a successful defense and a total wipe. Fredbear's up next, and if you've used Hawaii Endo 02, you'll know Fredbear is basically its upgraded version. He provides a solid range boost, and the best part, you can place one more of him on the field than Hawaii Endo. This makes Fredbear a much better option when you're stacking buffs to maximize your damage output. He's solid, reliable, and a great pick if you're aiming to beef up your team's performance. Then there's Spring Bonnie, who's basically a slightly stronger version of Endo. If you're looking for an all-around solid support unit for endless runs, Spring Bonnie is definitely someone you'll want to consider. They both have their perks, but Spring Bonnie edges out Endo with a bit more power. Plus, she's super easy to use and works well for most setups. Ballora is a bit like the middle ground between Music Man and some of the other support units. She's got a similar cooldown reduction effect as Music Man, but let's face it, her buffs are a little weaker. She's still pretty solid if you're working with a variety of units, but if you have the chance to snag Music Man or Eclipse Ballora, those two are definitely the top picks. And if you're looking for an even more accessible option, Maestro Puppet is an easy-to-get support that's almost as good as Fredbear, though it's got a slight dip in stats. But hey, if you're just starting out or want to boost your team without breaking the bank, Maestro Puppet will do the job just fine. It's a great alternative when you're working with a limited roster. Lastly, we have a bit of a mixed bag with some of the lower tier supports. Hawaii Endo 02 and Endo are decent choices if you're in a pinch, but when you compare them to other support units, they just don't quite hold up. And then we get to Fazcade, which, honestly, I don't even know why it exists. It's meant for money farming, but it's completely useless in actual gameplay. I think we can all agree Fazcade deserves a hard pass if you're trying to win anything. So there you have it, folks. If you're looking for the best support units, aim for Eclipse Ballora, Music Man, and Fredbear. These are the units that will make your team unstoppable. Keep these tips in mind and your support game will be on point. Until next time, Keep those towers defended and those enemies at bay. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Phantom Chica, Phantom Freddy, Shadow Freddy, Mangle, and Puppet. Alright, let's talk about some of the not-so-impressive units in Five Nights TD, the ones that'll make you scratch your head and ask, why are they even in the game? We're diving into the D-tier endgame units, and trust me, you're going to want to avoid these guys if you're trying to win big. First up, we've got Phantom Chica. Now, I know what you're thinking, but she can do AoE explosions. And yeah, she's not terrible when fully upgraded, but let's be real, she's still not cutting it compared to the top tier units. Her damage is just okay, and while her cooldown is low and those explosions can hit a bunch of enemies at once, she's still lagging behind in terms of overall effectiveness. You're better off with other units if you want to dominate the late game, but if you're stuck with her, at least she's like a slightly better Mangle. So there's that, I guess. Then we have Phantom Freddy. Now here's a unit that really needs some buffs. For 15k, you'd expect him to be packing a punch, right? Well, Phantom Freddy falls short with a low placement count, weak DPS, and a sad range. Seriously, what's going on with that? He's not exactly a game changer, and if you're looking for a reliable endgame unit, he's not the one you want. I'd suggest keeping your distance until the devs throw some love his way. Speaking of underwhelming, let's talk about Shadow Freddy. This guy is a prime example of not worth your time. His low DPS and small AoE range make him laughable when you compare him to other units, like Shadow Bonnie or even Blighted Endo Freddy. Shadow Freddy just can't keep up. At the end of the day, you want something that can handle waves of enemies, and this guy, not even close. So yeah, skip him if you're aiming for a win. Mangle. Oh boy, where do we start with this one? Honestly, Mangle's DPS range and explosion radius are all just bad. Like, you'll find better options even if you're halfway through the game. Sure, it's got a cool design, but that's about it. I definitely recommend passing on Mangle unless you've got absolutely nothing else, and even then, it's a tough choice. Why settle for Mangle when there are so many other endgame units that can actually pull their weight? Lastly, we've got Puppet, and oh man, don't even get me started. This unit has had so many rebalances, and yet, it still feels like a joke. With one of the lowest DPS in the entire game, it's safe to say Puppet isn't going to help you out in any serious late game scenario. If you value your sanity and want to actually enjoy the game, skip Puppet. It's just a recipe for frustration, and honestly, you'll probably end up wishing you had picked literally any other unit. So there you have it. These D-tier units aren't going to make your endgame experience any easier. Stick to the better ones and save yourself the pain. Trust me, you'll thank me later. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Blighted Endo Freddy, Marionette's Puppeteer, Bounded Shadow, Withered Bonnie, Plain Boy, Enforcer Bonnie, and Phantom Puppet. Alright, let's talk about some of the most interesting, and sometimes questionable, C-tier endgame units in Five Nights TD. We all know that grinding for the best units can take a while, but sometimes we gotta settle for some less than stellar choices. These units may not be the top of the food chain, but hey, they have their moments. So, let's dive into the underdogs of Five Nights TD. First up, we've got Blighted Endo Freddy. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a full AoE unit with solid range and decent DPS. It sounds good on paper, right? But here's the catch. It's only a little better than Marionette, and honestly, that's not saying much. If you've got the resources, sure, throw him in the mix, but don't expect him to carry the team. At the end of the day, you might find yourself asking if it was worth the investment. Speaking of Marionette's Puppeteer, this one's for you if you're on a budget. It's got the high AoE DPS going for it when fully upgraded. However, its range is, well, not great. It can be really effective in the right situations, especially if you're looking to stretch your in-game resources. Just know that its short range might have you second-guessing it in the long run. Then, there's Bounded Shadow. When it comes to Pierce Towers, this one's got solid DPS, no doubt. But here's the thing. It only has 2 placements, and the range is nothing to write home about. It's good in certain scenarios, but those limitations might make you think twice. Still, if you're in a pinch and need a strong Pierce unit, it can hold its own for a while. Now, let's talk about Withered Bonnie. Imagine Shadow Freddy, but longer range and single target focus. Sounds good, right? Well, she's actually a bit weaker compared to other endgame units, but her lower cost makes her a pretty decent pick if you're just starting to work your way up. Not the best, but for the price, you could do worse. Plain Boy is another one you might want to think twice about. While this unit has great range and solid DPS, it comes with a hefty price tag. It also only allows for 2 placements, which really hampers its effectiveness. When you compare it to Phantom Mangle, it doesn't quite hold up, so unless you're swimming in resources, this might not be the best pick for you. Finally, let's wrap it up with Enforcer Bonnie. This one's kind of like Valkyrie Chica, but not quite as good. While it's cheaper to get and can be pulled more easily, its stats just don't match up to Chica. Still, if you're after a decent unit that won't drain all your resources, Enforcer Bonnie can serve as a solid filler until you can get your hands on something better. So there you have it. Some of the more questionable C-tier endgame units in Five Nights TD. They may not be the top picks, but if you're stuck with them, they can still get the job done. Just don't expect them to carry you to victory all on their own. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Shadow Bonnie, Phantom Mangle, Leviathan Mangle, Wraith Freddy, Tuned Mangle, Spectral Chica, Clown Trap, Abyssal Foxy, Tangle, and Nightmare. Alright folks, let's talk about some of the B-tier units in Five Nights TD. These are the ones that might not quite make it to the top of the leaderboard, but still hold their own in the endgame. They've got their quirks, and while they're not going to be your first choice, they can still pack a punch in the right situations. First up, we've got Shadow Bonnie. Now, this unit is pretty interesting because it's like an almost 50% stronger version of Blighted Endo Freddy, but with a little twist: shorter range. It can be a bit tricky to place since that range can limit your options, but in Endless mode, the high cost isn't really a deal breaker. If you can afford it, Shadow Bonnie's power can be a real game changer. Next is Phantom Mangle, which, let's be honest, feels solid, but it's just a little shy of the heavy hitters. It does decent single target DPS, so it's not a terrible choice for those tougher enemies. Still, when compared to something like Valkyrie Chica, you'll find that Phantom Mangle lacks that extra oomph. Still, it's got its place in certain setups. If you're looking for something to handle multiple enemies at once, Leviathan Mangle is the way to go. This unit's fantastic for piercing through hordes of enemies, and its single target DPS isn't too shabby either. It's got that versatility, but again, it's not going to outshine the top tier units. Still, you can't go wrong if you need some area control. Wraith Freddy is a weird one, and by that, I mean it's both insanely good and a little frustrating. It's a full AoE unit with a DPS that matches Withered Endo Freddy. Sounds amazing, right? The only issue is its range is on the shorter side, which can make it a little tricky to get full value from. But hey, with one more placement slot compared to Withered Freddy, it's not a total loss. Now, let's talk about Tuned Mangle. It's definitely better than the regular Mangle, but don't expect it to be some game-breaking powerhouse. The main strength here is its Big Splash AoE, which can help clear out groups of enemies. However, it's still far from being OP. It's solid, but not something you'd rely on in the hardest endgame waves. Moving on to Spectral Chica, this unit is a huge step up from Phantom Chica. With high DPS and great range, Spectral Chica is much more reliable. If you were on the fence about using Phantom Chica before, then Spectral Chica is a massive upgrade. It doesn't hit the heights of top tier units, but it'll definitely do some serious work for you. Then there's Clown Trap, which, well, let's just say it's not the best. It does have a splash stun, which can be useful in certain situations, but its DPS and cooldown are pretty underwhelming. Consider it a worse version of Circus Baby. If you're looking for something that packs more punch, you might want to keep looking. To wrap things up, we've got Abyssal Foxy, and honestly, the only thing going for it is the slow effect. Without that, this unit would be nothing special. It's got decent DPS, but nothing extraordinary compared to other units in this tier. Still, that slow makes it somewhat viable for dealing with fast enemies. Just don't expect it to carry your team. So, there you have it. These B-tier units in Five Nights TD aren't the worst by any means, but they definitely need some strategy to shine. Whether you're using them for their splash AoE or relying on their unique abilities like slow or stun, they can still be useful in the right setups. But don't expect them to be taking down the big bosses anytime soon. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Master Puppeteer, Nightmare Mangle, Springtrap, Valkyrie Chica, Endo05, Fractured Bonnie, Hydra Mangle, Gunslinger Endo, Nightmare Bonnie, and Circus Baby. Alright, let's talk about some of the seriously good units in Five Nights TD. You know, those units that might not be the absolute best, but they've got enough tricks up their sleeves to totally wreck your enemies if you use them right. We're talking A-tier units here, reliable, versatile, and just plain fun to play with. So grab a snack and get comfy as we dive into some of these bad boys. First up, we've got Master Puppeteer. Now, don't be fooled by its stats, because it might not look like much at first glance. But trust me, its attacks come with a DOT, damage over time, effect that completely changes the game. When you factor in that DOT, the DPS of this unit goes through the roof. So even though it might seem like an underdog, it's definitely a solid pick, especially for those long battles. Next, let's chat about Nightmare Mangle. This one is an AoE monster with poison, solid DPS, and the ability to place 3 units at once. The only downside, its range is pretty terrible, but don't worry, that's fixable. You can give it a boost with some supports and enchants to make sure it's still firing at full force. With its massive AoE and poison combo, this unit can really mess up your enemies if you play your cards right. Moving on to Springtrap. This is one powerhouse pierce unit. We're talking insane DPS here, and it fires 5 piercing projectiles per attack. 5! That's a lot of damage getting thrown around. The only thing holding it back is that it can only be placed twice, but if you can make use of those 2 spots, Springtrap will absolutely melt through waves of enemies. Now, let's talk about Valkyrie Chica. She might not have the flashiest abilities, but she's a reliable single-target DPS that gets the job done. Plus, she's super cheap to place and upgrade, so you can start using her early and still make progress without breaking the bank. She's the kind of unit you want to have around just in case things get a little tight on the battlefield. Up next is Endo-05. This unit brings a solid mix of damage and utility, with the ability to stun enemies while also dealing good damage. However, the trade-off is its long cooldown. This means you might not get the stun effect as often as you'd like, which can limit its usefulness in the heat of the moment. Still, it's a solid unit that can make a difference when you need it most. Then we have Fractured Bonnie, one of the best evolutions in Five Nights TD right now. With its crazy good DPS and range, it's a monster on the battlefield. The only real downside here is the high cost to upgrade, so you'll need to be careful about when you invest in it. But once it's fully upgraded, it's hard to argue with just how powerful it is. Lastly, there's Hydra Mangle, a unit that literally rains napalm on enemies. Not only does it have insane DPS, but its AoE attacks come with the added bonus of burning enemies on hit. If you're looking to cause massive damage over time, this unit will deliver, no question. With that constant napalm barrage, it can easily hold its own and deal some serious pain. So there you have it. A-tier units that bring a ton of value to your setup in Five Nights TD. Whether you're looking for solid DPS, AoE damage, or some good old-fashioned crowd control, these units have something to offer. Have you used any of these units in your own games? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Nautic Crusher Mangle, Agonized Springtrap, Scarecrow Foxy, Dreadbear, Limitless Shadow, It's Me, Outlaw Freddy, Glitched Puppeteer, Bomber Boy, Jacko Endo, and Reactor Freddy. Alright folks, if you're looking to crush it in Five Nights TD with some insane late game units, then buckle up because we're diving into the absolute best of the best, the S-tier units. These bad boys are game changers, and while they might require some serious farming or grind time to get, they're absolutely worth it. So let's break down these powerhouse units that'll help you dominate the battlefield. First up, we've got Nautic Crusher Mangle, and let me tell you, it's a massive upgrade over the Leviathan Mangle. The DPS is off the charts, and you get more placement and longer range. Sounds great, right? Well, there's a catch. The recipe to craft this beast is a real grind. We're talking hours of farming for materials, but once you've got it, this unit will tear through enemies like a hot knife through butter. Now, if you're looking for raw power, you can't skip Agonized Springtrap. This guy is one of the top evolutions in the game. With its insane DPS and piercing attack, it's a monster. The only thing to keep in mind is that Fractured Bonnie tends to outperform it when dealing with single entities. But in any situation where you need to deal massive damage to a group, Agonized Springtrap is your guy. For those of you who love splash damage, Scarecrow Foxy is an absolute must-have. With solid stats and burn damage on every attack, this unit can melt through waves of enemies in no time. It's got some of the best DPS in the game, and you'll see just how effective it can be when placed in the right spot. If you love explosive power, Scarecrow Foxy won't let you down. Then there's Dreadbear, a powerhouse AoE unit with a burn effect and stun. While its stats might be lower than Scarecrow Foxy's, the utility it provides with the stun more than makes up for it. Plus, with the right upgrades, Dreadbear becomes an unstoppable force. It's like having your own mini tower of destruction on the field. If you thought we were done, think again. Limitless Shadow is a straight-up game breaker. Its AoE cone attack does a jaw-dropping 10,000 damage when fully upgraded, and the short SPA means it's spitting out damage faster than you can blink. The downside? Its range isn't the best, so you'll need to be strategic with placement. But trust me, once you see it in action, you'll forget all about that range problem. Next, we've got It's Me, which is basically a better version of Rave Demon Bonnie. It only has one placement, but don't let that fool you. It's incredibly money efficient and can deal tons of damage. If you're looking for something that can pack a punch without draining your resources, It's Me is going to be your go-to unit. And last, but certainly not least, Outlaw Freddy is here to steal the show. With continuous DPS and a splash attack, this unit can clear waves faster than you can say game over. Combine that with its amazing range and you've got a unit that's absolutely broken in all the right ways. If you're serious about late-game content, you definitely want to add Outlaw Freddy to your roster. So there you have it. These S-tier units are all about power, versatility, and blowing through enemies with ease. Whether you're into splash damage, single target destruction, or just overall raw power, these units will make sure you're at the top of your game. Keep grinding, keep upgrading, and you'll be the one to fear on the battlefield. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Astral Bonnie, Old Man Consequences, Valkyrie Prime, RDQ FSFASXC, Goliath Endo Freddy, and Knight Marion. Alright, so let's dive into the big guns of Five Nights TD. We're talking about those S+ tier endgame units that are not only absolute game changers, but also take your strategy to a whole new level. If you're in the endgame and looking for the best of the best, this is where you want to be. Let's kick things off with Astral Bonnie. Astral Bonnie isn't just another splash slow unit. Oh no, she's the splash slow unit. With some of the highest DPS in the game and arguably the best utility, she's basically an unstoppable force on the battlefield. And let's not forget, she's also the only Apex rarity unit, which means she's super expensive to place. But trust me, if you're lucky enough to get her, she'll make all those coins feel worth it. Next up, we have Old Man Consequences. This guy, absolute legend. He's one of the newest meta AoE towers, and wow, does he deliver. High DPS, solid range, and a cooldown that feels like it's almost non-existent at just 0.1 seconds. What really sets him apart though is how cheap he is to place and upgrade, especially when compared to other endgame units. Sure, you can only place one of him, but that just means you've got to be strategic. If you're all about single target DPS, then Valkyrie Prime is your go-to. She absolutely wrecks when it comes to raw damage, easily outshining her predecessor, Valkyrie Chica. We're talking about DPS that's on a whole other level. If you need to take down bosses or any high health enemies fast, Valkyrie Prime is your girl. Trust me, she does not disappoint. Now, let's talk about RDUQFSFASXC. Sounds like a keyboard smash, right? But this is Shadow Bonnie on steroids. And not the fun kind. Her damage is straight up broken. Like, we're talking about a unit that can melt anything in her path with absurd amounts of damage. She's probably the strongest unit in the game right now, and if you have her, you're in for an easy win. And last but not least, we've got Goliath Endo Freddy, or GEF for short. Now, GF is crazy expensive to place, but once you do, the payoff is huge. He has a massive range, full AoE, and his base damage is one of the highest in the entire game. Honestly, when this guy's out on the field, it feels like the whole map is under his control. He's borderline OP. But then, there's Knight Marion, who comes in with a range that's just broken. Sure, her DPS isn't as high as GEF's, but in the right scenario, she can even outperform him. If you're dealing with large, wide-open maps, Knight Marion can be your secret weapon. So, whether you're looking for insane DPS, unparalleled range, or just pure destruction, these S+ tier endgame units are the ones you want on your team. They're not just good, they're game-breaking. And with the right strategy, you'll be crushing the toughest challenges without breaking a sweat. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.